And I'm going to take you through the game and also show you some of the key moments that is very representative of what top level chess is all about. So e4 by Duda, and Vidit responded with e5. Now knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez, bishop a4, knight to f6, castles, and now b5, bishop b3, and bishop c5, the Arkhangelsk variation, which Vidit played against Durar Bailey Vasif, and managed to managed to win with the black pieces. Now, here Duda in his post-game interview said that he did predict that Vidit will go for this line. But in this position, after a4, rook b8, Vasif had played knight takes e5, knight takes e5, and d4. But Duda decided to go c3 here, which is the main line in this opening. d6, d4, bishop b6, a5, and now bishop a7. It's very important to note that you cannot take this pawn because rook takes a5, takes de, queen d8, king d8, and knight e5 is a better position for white. Bishop a7 is played, and now h3 and bishop b7 by Vidit. So the main move here is castles, which has like 300 games. And bishop b7 has much less, like 30 or 40 games that have been played here. But Duda said that he was expecting this, that Vidit will play it because Anish Giri had played it before, against Alexander Grischuk at the recent Croatia Grand Chess Tour. Now this becomes a small point where Vidit has to take care, and I think this is how top level players think. Like, which are the two players who are good friends of each other or who are following each other? And Duda managed to realize that Vidit was actually following a lot of Anish Giri's repertoire, or there were similar ideas and they have worked in past, as Vidit has been a second of Anish. So there could be something that is happening, and so he also checks Anish's games. One more example of this is when someone is preparing for, say, Vaishali, they would look at Pragnananda's game, or vice versa. These are the little things which have to be checked out. And here bishop e3, Vidit took on e4. This is very interesting. Well, here playing castles does not work anymore because d5, and you lose a piece because a7 is also hanging and so is c6. And if you take on e3, then d takes c6. Both pieces are opri. But this line is very specific. Takes d5. Bishop takes e3. Of course, now if you take back on e3, then I just move my knight. Black is winning. But he took on c6. And now another important move, knight takes f2. And well, this has happened in Grischuk Giri. Queen e2 happened. Well, if you take here rook f2, bishop f2, king f2, then there is bishop c6, and black is just better here. He has 3 pawns for rook, 3 pawns and a pawn, 3 pawns and a rook for 2 pieces, which is a lot. So queen e2, knight h3 double check, king h1, knight f2 check. Notice that you don't really want to play your king here because there'll always be bishop f4 ideas and knight g4 ideas. So he took on f2, bishop f2. And here Grischuk versus Giri had gone c takes b7, bishop a7. And I think Anish's preparation was spot on. He knew what he was doing. They played a lot of moves. I remember Anish had a lot of time on his clock. Somehow here the players agreed to a draw. That's how this game ended. But Duda decided not to take on b7. He decided to play queen f2, bishop c6, knight e5. And now he's threatening a checkmate on f7 point. Duda made an important and interesting comment in the game, in the post-game conference with Nigel Short, where he said, I was okay with the draw here. I knew, but I just wanted to test him whether he knew stuff or not. I think this is how modern chess works many times. With white, you try to go for some lines where black is walking a tightrope. And if black is well prepared, well, draw. If you just miss out on some details, then well, the game goes on. So bishop g2 by Vidit was a good move. Now if you take king takes g2, then there is queen g5 check, king f1, and now you can take queen e5 check and just king d8, and black is the one who is calling the shots here. So that's the reason why you can't take on g2 and clear off the d8 square for the king. So king g1 was played here. And here Duda said the next move is what he had never seen, which was queen f6 by Vidit. The right move according to him was castles, and after knight takes f7, which is pretty much forced, yeah, if you want to play this, knight takes f7, queen e7 is important. Queen f6 might look okay, but actually it loses after takes. Knight h6 is a nice line where the king is brought forward, check, and then eventually the bishop is lost with knight takes g2 and white wins. So knight f7, queen e7 was played here, and now if you play king takes g2, then there are rook f7 would transpose back into the game, but I think there is a better possibility with queen e4 check. But I'm not so sure. I mean, I think even here you will have to go into this kind of line, you know, like rook f7, king, bishop f7, king f7, or maybe there is something else that black can do, like rook b8 move. So it has to be looked at very carefully, because is castle in any way better than queen f6 than what happened? That's what happened in the game. Because king g2 is one option. What Duda showed a variation in his analysis was nd2 d5 blocking the bishop, and now king takes g2 is a mistake because rook f7 bd5 queen g5 check. But queen g2 check, king h3, and he said that here you have to take king takes f7 according to the engine, which is true. You have to do that, bd5 and king e8, and this position is equal, and this is what he was trying to test in general. But I don't think it's like this one way only for black. There are several ways, and what Vidit chose didn't look so bad. I mean, he played queen f6. By the way, in that last position, which I just showed right now, I did analyze a bit further as well here, and I was thinking, like, really, is this savable? You know, is this fine for black with the king in the center? But after knight f3, check, check, maybe check, queen here, check. It's still like the game goes on. It's not like over as such, but this should be a draw. Just like what happened in the game. Queen f6, knight f7 forced, take, take, rook f8, king g2, rook takes, bishop takes, king takes. And we reach this position where Vidit has 3 pawns for a piece, but you know, these 3 pawns are quite strong. I mean, but they are also not very advanced. That means that the piece should be slightly better for now. And I liked how Vidit played the next phase of the game. He had a choice of always going b4 here, but I think he did not like the fact that c4 and his b4 pawn would be slightly weakened. So he decided to keep it simple. He played rook b8, rook f1, king g6. And I think a very interesting point was made by Jakob Agard, who was there in the commentary. He said that this pawn, if it were back on b7, he would have preferred black's position here. The fact that the pawn is on b5, the knight can always attack it, or the rook can attack, and the a6 weakness gives white good compensation. So, I mean, good play, basically, not compensation. So king f2, h5. So Vidit says now I should start pushing my pawns. King f6, king f3, g6, a knight e4 check, king g7, knight f2, rook f8, and king g2 was played here. Here rook e8 was played. There was also this move rook f4, which was perhaps more accurate, with the idea of going rook a4 to attack here. And if he provokes b4, then you always have c5 to clarify. So just a line could be something like this. And the more pawns that get exchanged, the closer black gets to a draw. So rook e8, knight d3, and now g5, good move by Vidit, knight b4. And I think it was at this moment where things went wrong for Vidit. He went rook e2 check, which is a losing mistake in the game. It's not so simple to see, but Duda actually found all the best moves. That's why he's a world-class player. The right move is c5 here, take, rook a8, knight c7, rook a5. And now couple of tries. One is knight e8 check, king g6, knight d6, rook a2, rook b1, b3, let's say c4, b4, c4, b3, rook a4, takes, knight b3, and g4. And this is drawn because the white pieces are passive for now. If after rook a5 you don't give this check and take this and play king to f3, then I go king g6, rook d1, g4, king e3, rook a2 check, king f7 check. And perhaps here again it's kind of drawish. You don't know, maybe here white can still continue playing with something like rook d2, but then b4, but very close to a draw now with just one pawn that will be left, on the board. Or even if c4, rook a1, your pawns are quite menacing on the king side. But rook e2, what's the problem with this move? The problem is king h1. This is the move that was tremendous, and this was something that Duda found. And I should have, asked this question, but here's my question. Instead of trying to find the move, try to understand why king h1 is better than king f3 or king f1 or king h3. Try to analyze this position and try to understand. I think it's a very good example. So king f3, which looks like the most natural move. After rook b2, he goes for the move rook a1. If you take rook g5, king h6 here, and if I'm able to win this pawn and then go here, it should end in a draw. So rook a1 is the way in which he also played in the game, but rook a1, now there is rook b3. There's also g4 move, which leads to many complications here, g2, and then eventually you will clean up all the pawns. But I like this variation rook b3 for a reason that after check, king here, check, and I push you back to h1. Now the king is on h1, but now black has one extra tempo over the game, and black to play. What is the best move here? Yeah, this move is just classy. Rook c4. You could also play c5, which basically you have to cover up the b4 square. But rook c4 is the most accurate. The point is that after, let's say, something like knight b8 here, I have b4, a6, b3, a7, b2, queen, check. And actually it's black who is better here. And next move I'll take on a1, then make a queen. So rook c4, if he goes, say, something like knight b4, I take a6, rook f4, a7, rook f8, queen, take, and this 5 pawns versus rook is better for black, in fact, this position. So crazy lines here. And yeah, this rook c4 move, somehow after this, white should try to draw this position, by at the right time going for this b pawn with rook b1 and just agreeing to some kind of equality. So that is the reason why king h1 makes a lot of sense. King f1 is not good because after takes, I don't have rook a1. And then if you take on a6, my rook comes here. King h1, the point, also king h3, not good because after g4, you are, fixing your king into some kind of a mating net. So king h1 takes rook a1, and now c5 by Vidit. If you go for the same line now, take here. The problem is knight b4, just the only move here. And then you go here, I go a6. By the way, this is still not winning. A6, rook b4, a7, check, king g2, check, king f2, check. The same concept, yeah, here. And then I take on a8, and this should be okay. The king is much better, but this should be drawn. So rook b3, knight a6, rook c3, knight b4, rook c4, and now not a6, but first knight d3, and then the a pawn is very strong and should win for white here. So rook a1, c5, knight takes a6, b4, knight takes b4. Well, if you take cb, cb, knight c7, white is winning here. But knight b4 is the best move, I think, better than cb4. Take a6, again a strong move, bc3, a7. It's one of those moments where the side which starts to check first gets to the king. And this also shows the importance of having the move over material. Black has 3 pawns, but white has the move here. He checks, he checks, he checks, he checks, and it's a checkmate. Here Vidit resigned, he moves to the a file, check comes. And that's how his campaign ended. I think it was a very complicated game. Don't you agree? I mean, it was so complex, and it all ended with just one moment. You know, that's how brutal the World Cup is. If you go c5, good chances of a draw. If you play rook e2, that's just lost. And in that way, Vidit Gujrathi was eliminated from the World Cup. But what a great event it has been. First of all, Vidit is the only second Indian apart from Anand to have reached this far in a World Cup quarterfinals. Many top players have played World Cup: Shashi Kiran, Hari Krishna, Ganguly, many other players, many top players of India, but none of them have managed to reach this far. So which is great for Vidit that he managed to do that. Also, he has got an entry into FIDE Grand Prix 2022, where he will get to play strong events, which is a good thing. He also wins 35,000 US dollars, which is a good amount. Of course, 20% will be cut by FIDE, but it's still quite nice to come back with this sum.